In 2023, a brand new theme park concept made headlines as a rare, independent theme park set to rival Disney. The makings of this concept seem just as striking too, with over 1,000 acres of land set to be developed, former Disney Imagineers designing the park, and a chief creative officer pouring his own Pizza Hut franchisee fortune into the project. All of this was going to be led by a former preacher from Missouri. However, this $2 billion theme park project would quickly take a dark and twisted turn, with delays, lawsuits, and alleged manipulation and elder abuse. Needless to say, this story gets very weird, and will probably end up in a direction you won't expect. What's up guys, my name is Jake, and in this 18th episode of Cancelled, let's take a look at the massive failure that ultimately became of the American Heartland theme park. It all started with a press release. It was July 2023, and seemingly out of the blue, a brand new, massive theme park had just been announced. It wasn't one overseas in Asia or in the Middle East, but one deep in America's heartland. In fact, the project itself would be called the American Heartland Theme Park and Resort. The entire concept would be comprised of three major elements across its 1,000-acre site. The first would be the Three Ponies RV Park and Campground, an expansive complex which could fit up to 750 RV spaces along with another 300 cabins. Across the street would be the theme park and accompanying flagship hotel resort. American Heartland Park was planned to be around 125 acres, which, as I pointed out in the press release, was a comparable size to the domestic Disney parks. In fact, the whole project was being marketed as something which was being developed by former Disney Imagineers, many of them listed on their website. American Heartland, though, was going to be rather different. It generally wasn't going to have any major IP tie-ins or branded partnerships. It was honestly going to be rather similar to the never-built Disney's America Park, which was once planned for Virginia. The core idea being bringing guests through the American story. American Heartland, fully built out, was going to be comprised of 6 different lands. As you first enter through a grand plaza with vintage cars zooming overhead, you'd enter Liberty Village, a recreation of a classic American town. Further on, you'd encounter the Great Plains, a rural-themed area complete with some kiddie attractions and a large wooden coaster. Themed to the Pacific Northwest would be Big Timber Falls, complete with forests, mythic tales, and an enormous log flume ride. Bayou Bay would have a lush Louisiana swamp, where you would find paddle boats amongst the trees, rugged boat rides, and even a pirate stunt show. At the far end of the park would be Stony Point Harbor. This would all be themed around a classic American coastal town, complete with a haunted lighthouse dark ride, a small lagoon where guests could take out boats, and tall ships to explore. This is also where guests could check in to the 300-room 4-star hotel, one which was integrated into the park itself, and as such, themed to the area, evoking its own New England-style architecture. Finally, there's Electropolis, an Art Deco-inspired amalgamation of various iconic World's Fairs of the past. This land would not only have a Tesla Tower drop attraction, but would also have perhaps the most thrilling ride in the park, a launch coaster which would weave through the buildings. Overall, American Heartland would feature 19 different rides and attractions, and would cost over $2 billion to fully build out. These plans and concept art were all really well received from a conceptual level. Even looking at it today, it all does sound really cool and exciting. The concept art and model that was unveiled showed and described a detail-oriented, highly themed and immersive park, all at a scale which theme park fans had never seen before. But it was no mistake that the park and concept images were all really well thought out, as design firms like THD, Forek, and Cunningham had all design plans for the park. These individual designers and firms had put in a lot to create a unified vision, one which was pretty exciting and was the reason why this looked so professional. However, after the announcement and following its wide-reaching press, which stretched across the country and even internationally, most articles that were written usually came with a healthy level of skepticism, and it's easy to see why. The project was announced and being developed by a company called Mansion Entertainment Group, LLC. At the helm was CEO Larry Wilhite. Wilhite was a former preacher and entrepreneur, dabbling in many fields within the entertainment business. He primarily owned the Mansion Theater in Branson, Missouri, touted to be one of the largest indoor entertainment venues in the area. His theater had been moderately successful, and Wilhite had continued to expand the Mansion entertainment business into other ventures like animation, distribution, as well as a TV and film studio, which he had announced in 2022. Now, this concept would also include an attraction element which would have guests go behind the scenes. Ultimately, though, none of these film studios' plans came to fruition, but it was clear that Wilhite had aspirations for something much larger. In fact, the whole keynote ceremony they held for the grand unveiling was so intense. Not only did they open the ceremony with a performance of God Bless America, but they also did a dramatic reveal of the large-scale model, and even concluded with this kind of goofy dramatic exit, with Larry Wilhite opening his arms, confetti flying everywhere, all for some reason under the score from the 1996 film Independence Day. Following the American Heartland announcements, it was soon revealed by the company that they would be completely funding it themselves. They didn't go into exact details, but they claimed that the resort had already been fully committed, and that they wouldn't be taking on various loans and additional investors as many other projects would. They would basically be funding all of this through their chief creative officer, Gene Bicknell. Gene made his fortune through various investments, though mainly through his time as a Pizza Hut franchisee, at one point operating hundreds of locations, which he had started in the 1960s. Bicknell was also an investor in the Mansion, and with aspirations of his own to build something truly exciting, he joined forces and was seemingly funding the entire effort. At the time of the announcement, Bicknell was 89 years old. While those in the entertainment industry cautioned the legitimacy of a first-time theme park operator, many more would question the actual logistics of their plan. American Heartland had already purchased 2 large parcels of land, not on the outskirts of some massive American city, but pretty much in the middle of nowhere. The park was planned to be just outside of the small town of Veneta, Oklahoma, which is around 65 miles or around an hour's drive from Tulsa, the nearest international airport. More specifically, the 2 already acquired parcels of land would be located along the historic Route 66. The park was destined to be placed along the famous highway, and the other parcel, intended to be the RV park, was offset to the north across from an existing quarry mine. This was rural too. The plots of land were surrounded by what were essentially country roads, some of them just dirt, while the largest hotel in the former booming town of Veneta was a Holiday Inn Express. While these details were already baffling enough, what people really doubted was their very, very ambitious timeline. Mansion Entertainment said during their 2023 announcement that by 2025 they would have the RV park open, and a year later in 2026 they promised to have the theme park open. This was a ridiculous timeline. Regardless, the surrounding local communities all seemed to fully embrace the plan. With an advertised 5 million guests a year, this would have been the first major independent theme park built in America in years. It would have also been one of the largest private investments into Oklahoma and really the surrounding states, especially in terms of entertainment, in a long time. With such a unique location, it would also bring major investment to the often overlooked community. In fact, following the announcement, Facebook groups were created to advertise investment opportunities, with local parcels going up for sale with the potential for future investors to snatch up the land in anticipation for the upcoming park. Meanwhile, the company would show off a revised fly-through of the park in August, still pressing on with their aggressive timeline. Indeed, the company had seemed to be making progress, too. On October 30th, 2023, they hosted a groundbreaking ceremony for the Three Ponies RV Park and Campground. A whole shovel photo op was held with all major executives and politicians on the project in attendance, reassuring the media that this project was indeed happening. The opening date of 2025 was once again reassured, and by the end of the year, they shared a construction update showing heavy machinery at work with gravel being laid. Both the ceremony and the update videos were uploaded to their YouTube channel with comments turned off. By early 2024, while Mansion Entertainment was sponsoring the Rose Parade with their own custom floats, the Three Ponies site was more or less stagnant. While a small gravel staging area had been constructed, as well as temporary fencing, an office trailer, and the official sign, not much else had actually been done. They did, however, make a social media post claiming that the scope and budget of the project had increased, all while asking for people's patience, announcing a partnership with Pepsi, and claiming that they would have further announcements in the coming months. By April, representatives for the park went before City Council in an effort to answer some questions. The whole thing was just weird, with two representatives from Mansion Entertainment speaking to why things have slowed down. One of their executives, Steve Hedrick, claimed that the reason why the RV park progress had slowed was apparently his fault, and it was because he asked his designers to compress the RV park and move sections of it off a floodplain.
Some of you may have noticed that the RV park is lagging a little behind, and that's my fault. I'm sorry.
Regardless, their chief marketing officer claimed that even then, in April 2024, they were still on track for a Three Ponies opening in 2025, and the theme park, which hadn't even broken ground yet, for 2026. As they concluded with the promise of more frequent updates, the news on the project would only get worse. While both sides had continued to remain dormant and basically unchanged, in May of 2024, both Forek, one of the contracted theme park design firms, as well as Crossland Construction Company, had filed liens against American Heartland for unpaid fees. This was seemingly one of the first cracks in the plan. While the company did have a very small presence at the local Route 66 festival, still no progress had been made on either of the project sites. The projected opening dates were basically becoming impossible. And finally, in October of that year, they claimed that their plans had been pushed back by at least 3 years. They said that issues with the floodplain over Three Ponies was the root cause, and stated that the earliest the theme park would now open would be 2028. Even that was pretty ambitious, and with local residents and theme park observers pretty much losing all faith, the news on the project would only continue to get even worse. By early 2025, the park's main social media accounts had just stopped posting. Their Facebook would ultimately be deactivated, and the last post on their Twitter account would be in July of the previous year. It would make sense that all communications were about to go quiet, as the developers likely knew what was about to hit the headlines. On July 25th, 2025, a lawsuit was filed on behalf of Gene Bicknell, the chief creative officer and the primary source of funding. Bicknell, who was now 91 years old by this point, had filed a lawsuit against his fellow American Heartland executives, Richard Solanskis Jr., Stephen Hedrick, and CEO Larry Wilhite. The lawsuit made some pretty startling accusations and boldly stated that, quote, they coerced him into sinking more than $60 million into the design and construction of the American Heartland theme park. The lawsuit would go on to allege that, quote, Solanskis and Wilhite executed a predatory conspiracy of psychological manipulation, convincing Gene, through fraud and impersonation, that God himself was commanding him to both finance the park's construction and to grant Solanskis and Wilhite 2/3 ownership over the completed venture. Okay. So the lawsuit goes on to detail the alleged beginnings of the relationship with Gene and the other executives, stating that the original movie studio plans that Wilhite had for his theater in Branson, Missouri, did grow beyond the original scope. It claims that the men had mistakenly believed that Bicknell was worth billions of dollars when he wasn't. And since Wilhite was a former preacher and Bicknell was a devout Christian, the lawsuit alleges that the executives had conspired to use that to manipulate him. The lawsuit lays these communications out in quite a bit of detail, alleging that the executives pretended to be God, sending text messages, then subscribing Bicknell to an email that they controlled, and that he thought was being sent by God, which emailed him nearly every day. These emails called on Bicknell to essentially be obedient, to trust his business partners, not to ask any questions, and not to rely on his decades of business sense. The suit also lays out many other issues with the development as a whole, from lying to the press about certain executives' involvement, to baseless economic viability figures to secure funding. Or in other words, fraud. It also claims that for all the money being spent, and the millions which Bicknell had sunk into the company, it was all being used to enrich the developers, each one purportedly receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars for themselves and their families. It also details how by the end, Bicknell had sunk his entire fortune into the project, and claims that he had even overdrafted on his accounts and took out short-term loans. The lawsuit is scathing. It alleges serious claims of fraud and manipulation that basically showed the entire theme park project was propped up by lies, incompetence, and just malicious intent. I'll leave a link to the lawsuit in the description below if you want to take a look yourself. Regardless, everything in Bicknell's lawsuit was alleged, and nothing at the time of writing this has been proven in court, nor have any of the men named in the lawsuit been charged with any crime. One of the defendants, Rick Solanskis, who was defending himself, was accused of using generative AI in one of his court filings in January 2026. But of course, all of this is still ongoing. This is all just such an insane situation, one which has gotten crazier as time has gone on. I think it goes without saying, but progress on the American Heartland Park since 2024 has been basically non-existent. If the claims in Bicknell's lawsuits are to be believed, then the project had run out of money years ago. The one thing that is for sure, though, is that through all of this time, those outstanding payments were never made to the designers and contractors who were out of money. And now, going through the courts, they're looking to foreclose on the parcels of land to get something out of it. No work has been done on the site since. All of their social media accounts have been radio silent, and even the trademarks for the park, along with its lands and attractions, all expired in October of 2025. I think it's safe to say that the park has now been officially canceled. In the end, and in my opinion, this was just a stupid idea coming from stupid people who had no idea what they were doing. Larry Wilhite had a small, yet seemingly decently successful business, one that he was desperately trying to make bigger than it actually was. Again, in my opinion, his aspirations of building a big tourist attraction kept his reality basically unchecked. And with a financial backer who they thought had billions of dollars and was allegedly fully at their will, then what could possibly stop him from achieving something really big? But American Heartland was an extremely flawed idea from the start, clearly being run by developers who did not know what they were doing, nor how to do it. The only reason the park actually looked detailed and high quality was because of the acclaimed design firms they hired and subsequently didn't pay. But it really comes down to the core idea, one which was just not going to work. Why would you build it in the middle of nowhere? It's a place that has no infrastructure, operates on wildly different seasons, and is smack dab in the middle of Tornado Alley. Nobody should have ever taken them seriously just on the fact that they said they were going to have it all open in just 3 years. What an enormous waste of $60+ million. So, as more information comes out about what really happened behind the scenes here, and as more time passes on the now overgrown parcels of land where the theme park was set to be built, this might ironically go down as perhaps the biggest American theme park failure in the last few decades. One which was ultimately, and in my opinion deservedly, cancelled. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please do consider subscribing to this channel, Bright Sun Films. Until the next time, my name is Jake, and thank you very much for watching.